Okay, this is my film industry research project. I did it on movie monsters of the 1900s, and it's by Jimmy Roberts, me, so yeah. Overview. So, cinematic monsters often represent society's deepest fears as a way to provide commentary on harrowing cultural events. And you can see that oftentimes the monsters depict or are in close relation to current events that are going on around the world at that time. So, these monsters usually cover issues of gender, race, class, and sexuality. Those issues are almost always at play with monster movies, and these ideas are linked to the cultures that produce them. And we both fear and desire monsters. We fear the other, while we desire to know more about the unknown. It's the allure of the sublime, a draw to explore the unexplored, the misunderstood. It's the love for monsters, I think, really revolves around human nature. So in this presentation, we will review influential movie monsters over the course of the 1900s, what they represented, and their eventual effects on society. And we're going to go through decade by decade to show you how monsters have progressed through the years. So the first monster we're going to cover is Caesar, or Caesar. I'm not completely sure how to pronounce it, but he appeared in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And this movie came out in 1920. And this is one of the first zombie-like characters to appear in film. As you can see, he's coming out of that box thing, he's dead, but now he's alive, so yeah. He represented the national mindset that allowed the rise of Nazism in Germany by presenting a sleepwalking community which allowed unspeakable horror to occur. And the German expressionist aesthetic perfectly captured the psyche of this murderous sleepwalker, the zombie who was being compared to German civilians during the Nazi regime. So the next monster we're going to take a look at is Nosferatu, and I'm sorry, Count Orlok in the movie Nosferatu, and this came out in 1922. And Count Orlok was one of the most popular figures of the German expressionist film movement, and this was actually the very first vampire film. And when this came out, this story was an allegory for the Spanish flu pandemic that ravaged much of the world a few years prior. And the monster himself is thought to represent repressed sexual desires. And it's the allegory for the flu because, much like the vampire, it shows up in this mysterious force is causing, really gruesome death and destruction throughout um, a small town, much like the Spanish flu did as it ravaged place to place throughout Europe. Next up is Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein. This came out in 1931, and this is when you see an emergence of early themes surrounding the monstrous use of technology. And Mary Shelley, when she wrote this book, there was a lot of commentary on the dangers of enlightenment, and that this whole idea that scientific achievement is always good shouldn't necessarily be the case, because scientific achievement, if used the wrong way in the case of Frankenstein, can be the cause of downfall. And then also, this monster was more humanized than a lot of other monsters that appeared in film before him. He showed to have a lot of caring, selfless traits. The next movie we're going to talk about is King Kong, and the monster that appeared in that movie was King Kong, just as the movie's titled. And this movie originally came out in 1933. It has a ton of remakes that you've seen throughout all the years. And this creature, I think, going off of that trend set by Frankenstein, is a creature that's known for exhibiting a profound amount of humanity, despite their monstrous appearance. This is like a 40, 50-foot brute, who shouldn't be able to feel love by his appearance, but still is able to exhibit these human characteristics. And this provides a lot of commentary on the other being misunderstood, other people who you don't necessarily know, where you would villainize by their appearance, despite their intention. It goes a lot along with the lines of what the early explorers did to King Kong when they got to the island. They demonized him because of his appearance, even though they didn't fully understand his intentions. And then it also talks about the theme of capitalism, and specifically the capitalistic impulse to monetize off of horror and horrific spectacle. It's when America tries to take King Kong in and profit off of the monster, that's when everything kind of goes wrong, goes to shit. So the next monster we're going to talk about is Gojira, and this movie, Gojira, came out in 1954, and the monster that we're going to talk about in this film is, as you will know, Godzilla, as this film was recut and recast before it actually became Godzilla, but Gojira was the original name of the monster and the movie released in Japan. And this monster was a representation of the trauma that was endured by the Japanese people from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings, and it also represented the dangers of nuclear war, nuclear arsenal power in general. And interestingly enough, this monster has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and it was the first monster to kind of have a radioactive backstory, where there was a radioactive crisis, and then this monster was a result of it, much like other monsters in the future. Like gosh, I'm just thinking of Spider-Man, but I know that the Spider and Spider-Man had radioactivity and bit it, whatever, yada yada. He was the first one who had that backstory. So the next movie we're going to talk about is Night of the Living Dead, and the monster, or actually monsters inside of this movie that I want to cover are the dead. And this movie provided a really powerful commentary on race relations and also Vietnam. This came out in the 60s during a really tumultuous time in America and just in the world overall. And these zombies could be viewed much like the zombies that came out in the first ever zombie movie, representing those German citizens during the time of the Nazi regime. These zombies could be viewed as thoughtless contributors to the Vietnam War that was happening. So these are people who supported, the war against communism no matter the cost and stuff like that. And in this movie, our protagonist is a black hero, and there's a lot of actually, I don't want to say like ironic race relation, but the fact that our black hero survives a zombie apocalypse only to be killed by a redneck posse is very telling of the dangers that face certain individuals in American society. And there's also a scene inside the movie of an all-white zombie mob chasing the lead, and this alludes to a lynch mob. So there's a lot of different imagery that alludes to Vietnam and then also race relations in America. So the next movie I'm going to talk about is The Exorcist, and the monster in here I want to focus on is the demon Pazuzu. And here in 1973, there was a lot of female empowerment movements going on, and this monster did allude to the fear society had of that female power. And the demon possessed a specifically young girl, which was a commentary on the anxieties related to coming of age and puberty. And after that, we have Halloween, which is a classic, and the monster I'm going to talk about in this movie is Michael Myers, or he's also known as the Shape. And this monster is a really great representation of toxic masculinity and the repressed male rage. So this monster doesn't show any exterior emotion, and that repressed rage festers inside, which I think is a good commentary on toxic masculinity and how sometimes men are taught to not show their vulnerable emotions on the outside. And this monster is very similar to other classic monsters of the 70s and 80s era, like Freddy Krueger and Jason. And then lastly, in the 90s, we have Candyman. And this is a great villain, and I'm sorry, not a villain, a monster. And it actually just spurned a remake the other year that I watched, and that was great too. So the Candyman was, this monster was the son of a slave, and the backstory was that the Candyman was originally lynched for his relationship with a white woman, and the ghost of this man lives on, haunting America, basically refusing to repress its racist past. And it's a great movie. So those were the monsters that I decided to cover from the 1900s, and I think all of them really do represent innate things inside of us all that make us human, and I think that's why we're drawn so much to monsters. It's the allure of the unknown, of what we want to learn about each other, and then the fact that it just the familiarity of them scares the shit out of us. So I was really interested to do this project. I love movie monsters, and I hope you guys enjoyed.